Redwood Massacre, the blood-soaked slasher returns, is a dark night in the timber-lined silence of the forest, where every rustle of leaves could be someone's last breath. That's where the legend begins again. The story of Redwood Massacre harks back to the golden age of slasher cinema, when horror meant raw tension, creeping dread, and an anonymous killer lurking behind pines and shadows. From the brutal origins of the genre, films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974, that carved horror's path with saws and bone-chilling fear, slashers proved that terror could be real, visceral, and intimately unsettling. Today, decades later, Redwood Massacre, the blood-soaked slasher returns, aims to revive that primal fear, to reawaken the horror buried in woodlands, where survival is uncertain and the killer is always just out of sight. The returning fan of slasher style will recognize the classic setup: a group of unsuspecting victims, strangers or friends, modern or old school, drawn to a remote location, the dense redwood forest, where cell phone signals fade and help is miles away. The isolation is the villain's ally. Their laughter around a campfire, the quiet rustle of leaves closing at night, the hush between conversations, all become part of a mounting dread. In this return, the forest isn't just backdrop, it's a character itself. Towering trees cast long shadows, fog creeps slowly across moss-covered ground, distant owl calls echo. The environment is as ominous as any masked horror icon. The killer, the slasher, must remain horrifyingly anonymous, unseen until the moment of violence. Psychology is minimal, shock is maximum. That's the core of what defines a slasher film. A masked or hidden killer, victims picked off one by one, and tension that ratchets up until the final confrontation. In Redwood Massacre, the killer returns after years of silence. Maybe a return to settle old scores, or the reawakening of ancient anger. The motive doesn't need explanation, because fear doesn't wait for answers. What matters is the terror in shadows, the thud of footsteps at midnight, the scream that echoes across redwood trunks. For a modern audience, especially those who grew up with horror and VHS nights, or who now binge-watch thrillers on their blanket light, the return of this classic slasher style offers both nostalgia and a fresh scare. Horror in recent years has morphed, mixing subgenres, embracing psychological horror, supernatural elements, or horror comedy hybrids. But there's still deep love for pure, unfiltered slasher horror. Simple rules, fast pace, and a pounding heartbeat when the killer strikes. Redwood Massacre doesn't try to modernize by adding ghosts or demons. It stays true to roots. No supernatural twist, no over-the-top gore for the sake of shock. Instead, it leans into real-world terror, a masked figure, a blade, and the forest's isolation. The fear feels possible, grounded. The characters are ordinary people, friends, strangers, maybe a couple whose vacation turned nightmare. That relatability makes the fear hit harder, because fear doesn't come from monsters. It comes from what could be real. Still, modern filmmaking allows this return to have cinematic polish. The forest will be shot with sweeping drone cinematography, long shadowy pines swaying in the wind, and intimate handheld shots when tension peaks, all to bring the terror close, visceral. Sound design will matter. Crackling leaves, sudden silence, footsteps snapping twigs, primal sounds that unsettle before anything is seen. This isn't just nostalgia, it's an evolution. The same fear delivered with contemporary filmmaking tools. For horror fans, there's a longing for this kind of fear, the kind where you don't know who'll die next or how. For those new to slashers, Redwood Massacre promises unrelenting tension, unpredictable danger, and the grim suspense that defined classics. It asks no more than, when the night comes and the trees whisper, "Will you make it out alive?" In a time when horror movies often try to do too much, complicated mythology, layered allegory, or subtle psychological dread, there's a unique power in simplicity. A killer, a forest, night, fear. Redwood Massacre, the blood-soaked slasher returns, reminds us why slashers were born. Survival horror at its rawest. So, If you turn the lights down, grab blankets and brace yourself. Maybe keep the door locked. You just might rediscover what made horror terrifying. Because sometimes the oldest nightmares are the hardest to escape.